episode of Data Driven Leadership, we're diving into data visualization. We will kick this episode off with our Solution on the Spot segment, and that's where we bring in thought leaders and ask them for solutions to relevant data challenges. Afterwards, we've got two experts who will take real live examples and break them down for us. Specifically today, we're going to look at the issue of data visualization and where to begin and maybe how to fix some of it. To help us Solution on the Spot is Anna Peterson, our BI practice lead at Resultant. Hey, Anna, how are you?
Hey, Jess. Good. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Awesome. Well, hey, so couple questions for those who don't know you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who is Anna Peterson?
Sure. So, I lead the business intelligence team at Resultant. I've been with the company for about 3.5 years. And I do all things BI tools, so Power BI, Tableau, all the front end fun visualization efforts through the company my team gets to work on, and it's so exciting.
The Solution on the Spot, where we gotta kind of figure out what we do, is a client comes in and they are really excited, innovative, data forward. They really want to go change the game in their industry. And as you and I sit down and start to understand and unpack what they're doing, we're realizing too that there's no standards here. Like they're trying to break the game, change the game, totally innovate. And so they want that data-driven insight. And they're excited about it, engaged, but they're really not sure where to begin. So if we were to walk into that situation, how do we Solution on the Spot together? So where would you begin in that conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love the process of starting a new project and getting to hear about something like this. But I think what you or I would do in that situation is try to understand the motivating factor, and why they're trying to get those data-driven insights. So oftentimes, you'll hear somebody say, well, I've heard about Power BI or I've heard about Tableau and I want a dashboard. And they don't know anything like what they would want on it or what questions it's trying to answer.
They look cool. That's a cool dashboard.
Right,
I want one.
Right. It's cool. I want to see the dials. I want to be able to click on something and maybe it can be on a monitor in my office. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally understandable. They are really cool. But I would want to understand, from a bigger picture, what is it that you do? How do you make decisions? Who are you benefiting? What makes you tick to be able to understand better, what are we doing here versus just we're going to build something really cool and shiny.
Yeah. And what about, I mean, I don't know, if you do have, those CEOs or CIOs who are really into the flashy dashboards, they do want all the really cool stuff and they want to click and drive. If they don't have any of that yet, how do you keep them from being stifled by this is a process, we'll get you I don't know, how do you kind of help them understand where we have to begin? Because I could see them being impatient, right?
Oh, definitely. And there's this idea that, we're gonna adopt this tool and that's gonna solve everything and we're gonna be better because of it. But I mean, we talk about this a lot at Resultant, but this starts with people. And we can introduce this, this new tool or this shiny dashboard, but we need it to actually be useful, and to be adopted, and to have people understand it, because we do not want this dashboard graveyard where dashboards unused go to die and live forever with no one looking at them. We need to start with the why, and make sure this is something that is really going to be able to be adopted by the right audience and be useful and then be maintained, because like anything, this is not something that you build once and never touch again.
Yeah. What's the I don't know, when you're building out a visualization solution for a client too, I imagine as we would work together, you'd have some thoughts on best practices, and even Beyond best practices with data, like breaking down the project for them to appreciate what it does take to get to a really cool front end. Like, can you explain some of that too?
About like what it would take from a developing a project perspective.
Yeah, like how do you, like if they really have that image in their head of like the super cool dashboard that's on TVs that all of their team can look at and see what they need to do
Yeah.
differently this hour, like how do you help explain like here are largely the blocks of work we have to do to get to that outcome?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. Some clients do have an understanding of, this is a big lift. This is not something that's a couple hours you sit down and you build out something that's going to change the way you work.
Yeah.
And some don't. But I do think understanding like we talked about earlier, why we're doing this, but then breaking things down into a small enough, like digestible chunk of work,
Yeah.
so that we can get something out there and work iteratively and add on. Because like even the best data visualization engineers or dashboard designers are going to make something that may not be the best way to visualize the data. And we're going to lean on people like the
Yes.
business they know their data best. They know their processes best. We're not going to have 100% of the answers, but that's why the partnership is critical. And we're really trained in being able to understand how to ask the right questions to be able
Yeah.
to say like, why are you doing it this way? And, not from a point of saying, well, this is all wrong, but why are you doing this way? Let's think critically about it. Is this the right process? Can we change that? And sometimes they just need to see it to be able to say like, oh yeah, that does work better. That does look great or something like that.
Well, and right, like we talk about data literacy a little bit when we're working together, right? And so there's also clients we meet and people like consultants that we meet that aren't quite as data literate as you might be. And so I remember working together and there are times where you're like, why do we think that needs to be a bar graph? Because normal,
Yeah.
and you can kind of walk people over and explain, here are the best visual tools for the kinds of things that you're trying to point out, right? So like if you need a bar graph, it's for this intent. And I can't rattle that off. Like, I don't know.
Sure.
Can you rattle that off? Like
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was actually just on a call the other day where they're like, the idea of over engineering something,
Yeah.
where so much thought goes into something and to the point where like we might be making this more complex than it needs to be. And I had a call where someone said, well, we have this filter or set of filters that are applied to a report. And they said they want to make a rule where you can only pick 3. And I said, oh, okay. How did we get to that number? And the idea was, well, I just think it'll be confusing. And you have to like take a step back and think they probably put a lot of thought into this.
Yeah.
And there may be a legitimate reason, but had you considered, how much more complicated it may be or frustrating to a user that you can only pick 3? And was it for a suppression reason, or was it for a technical limitation or a data limitation or something like that? And so trying to like get beyond that initial decision is something that I really enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. And so, I mean, this was the other part of something you just said that I feel like is relevant too, is like what happens when the client has clear specification about the exact things that they want, and you're like, the data isn't
Yeah.
there. Like it's
Yeah.
either not specific enough or it doesn't exist. Like, what do you do when that's the case?
I mean, that happens all the time.
Okay.
And whether that be like from a governance perspective, an issue with the data,
Yeah.
For example, like we worked on an epidemiological project in the past where it was ramped up really fast and there were no standards for this data. And everyone's in this boat where we just have to continue moving forward or we're going to sink. And there little things like poor quality in data, whether that be a text field where it should be a drop down, or missing information because whatever system we're entering this into it doesn't require the field, or something like that, that causes visual gaps in data. I think in this epidemiological example, we would have missing like dates where, oh, we couldn't track it for this period of time for XYZ reason, legitimate reasons that we're missing data. And they say, well, we need to put something there.
Yeah.
We can't just show that there's no data. And you hear that and you totally understand where they're coming from. They,
Right.
They don't want it to look like that there's missing information or we have no idea what was going on during this period of time. But at the same time, you have to work with those limitations that you have, and you can build assumptions. And if there's no standards, that can be really hard to do. And that's where the research that you're talking about comes into, and working with the actual scientists who know this data and what that information means. But you can't leap to say, well, there was maybe no data that day, because we don't know. It's just missing. So being really intentional and setting those assumptions and making it clear to the user or the consumer of that information what that means, so that people aren't left to draw their own conclusions.
Right. So it's like sometimes if you're trying to pump out insights or data and then you are left in a wake of it for whatever reason, your pipeline didn't work, so the data wasn't available, whatever. It almost can tell a worse message. And so I think the other thing I think is really challenging about some of the examples you're bringing up too is, and maybe the benefit, in my opinion, to Resultant is in those moments, it's like there's a little moral compass too, right?
Definitely.
Where people are like, what could we do and how can we make it okay? And you kind of have to be like, you got to find your North Star. I don't know if those analogies align, but like, it's awesome, right? Like the fact that we have research and we have data scientists that we partner with who can make sure that what we're doing is statistically significant, and you do that too, but like that partnership of best practices, creative thinking, coming from outside the box, thinking about other things that we can do, and making sure we're bringing the right data that's really relevant and meaningful. And I imagine, I can't tell often when I'm looking at a bunch of data anywhere on the news, online, if like it's just not like well cleansed and analyzed in a statistically significant way. I imagine you see that and it probably drives you crazy. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, you're totally right about that moral compass. And I have been put in positions before where I've had people straight up ask me, can you make it look like this? And the answer is no. I think understanding like where is it that you're coming from, or what decision is it that you need to make, or what policy is it that you're trying to push, or something like that, to be able to show maybe show something that can help tell the story that they're looking for, but purposefully like knowing what the answer you're trying to show and forcing your data. It's so easy to do, and you can't do it. But I think more often than not, people are doing it unintentionally.
They have no idea. Like no one's the villain that's like, I need it to look like bad or good here, right? They're just like, could it? And you have to be like, no. Or here, we could do it this way, right?
Yeah.
Like we can get to what you need, but we can't change the data to be what you need it to be.
Exactly. And there are certain things we can do, like putting data in context. And, we do a lot of work where we're measuring populations and comparing that against taking a look at a chart or a table or some bit of data or information out of context can also unintentionally lead the user to make the wrong assumption about that information.
Yeah.
And it can be problematic. And I think that responsibility falls on us to make sure that what we have put together is easy enough, intuitive enough to understand, but also has all the information so that we are not enabling people to make these leaps.
Yes. And you keep, I
So
think that's like, I didn't mean to explode the moral compass concept, but yes, like there's this sense of like, you have to make sure that you have a team that's full enough with appreciation for data integrity, that what we're pushing out, really, we're thinking all the way through, does it drive the right behaviors in the first place? Because you could put together a graph that is accurate, and it is also wildly misleading when it comes to the meaning of that data and the way
Oh,
you visualize it, right?
yeah. Dual axis charts is like I think it's like the number one reason, they don't align, and you can make anything look like I mean, I could probably
Right.
make a line chart, draw a face or a stick figure if I wanted to. There's some pretty cool things you can do. But you also, to the same point, like we've seen clients who will come to us and will say, I need to convey this story to my leadership or whatever the audience is to be able to get this done. And I don't think that that's a like an integrity thing at all.
Yeah.
It's a data storytelling thing,
Yeah.
which is all of this sort of goes into communicating something with data, which is all very interesting to me. But, I had a client where they were a team within a broader organization, and they needed to convince their leadership that the work that they were doing had a much greater purpose, served a bigger purpose, had a much greater return on investment long term. And we were able to build a really compelling story for them that convinced their leadership that, hey, actually, we should invest more into this team. Like, we had no idea.
Wow.
And I think that is probably one of the most fun parts of my job is not just building a dashboard, but being able to communicate that entire story
Yeah, I
to
see
the
it.
audience.
So that sounds like if I put you in a box and said data visualization, like it's so much more than that. It's about
Yeah.
accurate data storytelling that can lead to meaningful change.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
cool.
The data
That's cool.
visualization is just a part of that.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I think that you've solved the solution on the spot, and so I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
It's really nice to be with you today. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jess Carter. And don't forget to follow Data Driven Leadership wherever you get your podcasts, and rate and review, letting us know how these data topics are transforming your business. We can't wait for you to join us for our next episode.